The Crosswalk on Delancey. A decorated officer steps onto a quiet sidewalk in his immaculate dress uniform, ribbons catching the afternoon light. He's there to conduct a federal review of a struggling precinct. But before he even reaches the front doors, a prejudiced patrolman decides a black man simply couldn't be a real Navy captain. What happens next isn't a misunderstanding. It's a career-ending catastrophe. Part 1. Elm and Forth. The wind off Lake Erie cut hard through the streets of Brindlewood, a dense, working-class district just outside Cleveland. For most people, the mid-November chill was reason enough to hunch deeper into their coats. For Captain Wendell Ashford, it barely registered. At 54, Wendell had endured sandstorms in the Gulf and freezing winters aboard a destroyer in the North Atlantic. A little Ohio wind was nothing. He adjusted the cuffs of his pristine Navy service dress blues, brass buttons catching the overcast light. On his chest sat 3 neat rows of ribbons: the Bronze Star, the Meritorious Service Medal, the Navy Commendation Medal, each one earned across 29 years of service most civilians could never fully understand. Today, though, Wendell wasn't commanding a vessel. He'd been assigned by the Department of Defense as a liaison to a joint federal-state task force tasked with inspecting local precincts that had applied for a substantial federal grant funding tactical equipment and training. The 12th Precinct of Brindlewood was on his list, a department with a troubling record of excessive force complaints and civil rights concerns that had never quite resulted in meaningful consequences. Wendell wasn't merely a visitor. He was the man whose report would decide whether that funding ever arrived. 2 blocks from the precinct, he paused at the corner of Delancey and Forth, checking his watch, a retirement gift from an admiral he'd once served under. Noting he was exactly 12 minutes early for his scheduled meeting with Precinct Captain Diane Whitcomb. He stood at the crosswalk, waiting for the light, his posture rigid, radiating quiet authority. Cruising down Delancey in a marked patrol car was Officer Dale Rourke, 36, thick-necked, carrying a permanent scowl that suggested a general contempt for the world. Beside him sat his partner, Officer Priya Anand, 24, 6 months on the job, still learning to navigate the particular discomfort of riding with a training officer whose reputation in the precinct ran toward old school, a euphemism everyone understood, but rarely said aloud. Rourke's eyes swept the sidewalks with a hawk's restless suspicion. At the red light, they landed on the corner. "Would you look at this clown?" he muttered, leaning over the wheel. Priya glanced up from the terminal screen. "Who? The guy at the crosswalk?" "Yeah, guy playing dress-up. Full uniform, medals up to his collarbone. Who's he trying to fool?" "He looks pretty official, Dale. He might actually be Navy." Rourke scoffed. "Give me a break. Guy like that, a real captain. Probably bought that at a surplus store. Stolen valor. I hate these frauds. I'm checking him." "We've got a call holding on the east side." He was already turning the wheel. The cruiser jumped the curb, blocking the crosswalk, feet from Wendell, lights flashing red and blue across his uniform. Wendell didn't flinch. Part 2. General Patton. Rourke stepped out, hand resting on his belt, and strutted toward Wendell with an exaggerated swagger. His partner climbed out behind him, staying a few paces back, eyes darting toward the small cluster of pedestrians who'd stopped to watch. "Hey, Admiral," Rourke barked. "Where's the costume party?" Wendell stood perfectly still, looking down at Rourke from several inches above him. "Excuse me, officer," he said, his voice a deep, resonant baritone, calm and entirely without fear. Rourke didn't like the tone. He'd expected panic. "I said, what's with the get-up, buddy? Collecting for the Salvation Army, or just trying to score a free coffee?" "This is a United States Navy service dress uniform," Wendell said clearly. "I'm Captain Wendell Ashford, currently on federal duty. Unless you're investigating a specific infraction, I'd ask you to clear the crosswalk." Rourke laughed, glancing back at Priya. "You hear this? Captain Ashford. Sure. And I'm the Pope." He turned back, expression hardening. 10 years on this beat. I know a scam when I see one. You think you can slap on some fake medals and walk my streets pretending to be a naval officer? That's a crime. Impersonation is indeed a crime, Wendell said evenly. I assure you my commission is entirely real. I'm happy to provide my Department of Defense credentials. He reached slowly toward his breast pocket. "Hands where I can see them!" Rourke snapped, hand snapping the retention strap on his holster. "Dale, relax. He's just getting his ID," Priya said, but Rourke ignored her. Wendell withdrew a leather wallet and extended it. Inside, his DoD Common Access card displayed his rank, branch, and a federal inspector's credential. Rourke snatched it without really looking, already committed to his conclusion. "Looks fake to me. Probably printed it in somebody's basement." "Officer, I strongly advise you look at those credentials properly. I need your name and badge number. You're illegally detaining a federal officer." That was the trigger. Rourke's face flushed. "Oh, you want my badge number? How about a pair of bracelets instead? Turn around." "Dale, wait! What are we even charging him with?" Priya said, alarm finally breaking through her hesitation. "Fraudulent impersonation, disturbing the peace, failure to comply," Rourke snapped, grabbing Wendell's shoulder and trying to spin him. Wendell, a man who had once wrestled a 200-pound line across a pitching deck in gale force winds, barely moved. For a flicker of a second, something like uncertainty crossed Rourke's face. The sudden, physical recognition that he was dealing with someone considerably stronger than himself. But Wendell had spent decades learning exactly when to hold a line, and when resisting, only handed an opponent what they wanted. He relaxed his stance and turned, hands behind his back. "I'm complying," he said, "but mark my words, officer. You're stepping over a line you won't uncross." "Save it for the judge," Rourke growled, snapping the cuffs tighter than necessary. Part 3. The Ride. The back of the cruiser smelled of stale coffee and cheap cleaner. Wendell sat with perfect posture despite the cuffs, staring straight ahead. Priya drove, hands trembling slightly on the wheel, eyes flicking to the mirror. Unlike Rourke, she wasn't blind to what she was seeing. The razor creases in the uniform, the weight of real brass, the faded, sun-worn ribbons that no costume shop replica ever quite got right. Her own uncle had served. She'd spent childhood afternoons looking through his shadow box. "Dale," she said quietly, "did you actually look at the ID? His uniform doesn't look fake." "God, Anand, you're soft," Rourke said, rolling his eyes. "It's a con. They make it look real so bleeding hearts like you fall for it." In the back seat, Wendell heard every word. The casual, unguarded prejudice didn't shock him. He'd encountered variations of it his entire career. But hearing it from a man wearing a badge, sworn to protect the public, confirmed everything he needed to know about this precinct. "Officer Anand," he said. She startled at her name. "As a sworn officer, you have a duty to intervene when you witness a colleague violating a citizen's rights. My detainment is unlawful. My credentials have been illegally seized. This is your opportunity to correct that before we reach the precinct." "Don't you say a word to him," Rourke snapped at her. "You side with him over your training officer? I'll make sure you spend your career directing traffic in the snow." Priya's grip tightened on the wheel. She looked at Wendell in the mirror, his eyes calm, carrying no plea, only a quiet weight, and looked away. "I have to follow my training officer," she said. "Understood," Wendell said simply. "Your choice has been noted." Part 4. The Bullpen. The cruiser pulled into the precinct's gated lot. Rourke hauled Wendell out by the arm. "End of the line, Admiral. Let's show the squad a real American hero." Inside, The 12th Precinct's bullpen buzzed with its usual chaos, until Rourke shoved through the doors, dragging Wendell behind him. "Look what the cat dragged in," he announced to the room. "Got ourselves a 5-star general playing dress-up on Delancey Street." The laughter died fast. Veterans in the room recognized real ribbons when they saw them, and the calm, immovable certainty on Wendell's face silenced the rest. At that exact moment, Captain Diane Whitcomb reached the bottom of the stairs, on her way to greet her scheduled federal visitor. She looked across the bullpen. Her eyes landed on Rourke, and then on the cuffed man in the immaculate uniform. Her blood went cold. She had seen the dossier photograph. "Rourke," she whispered, "what have you done?" Part 5. Uncuffed. "Take those off him, now!" Whitcomb's voice cracked across the room as she crossed the floor at a near sprint. Rourke blinked, caught entirely off guard. "Captain, wait, you don't understand. This guy is a fraud. We picked him up on Delancey." "Shut your mouth." Whitcomb shoved past him, fumbling with the cuff key, hands shaking so badly she dropped it once before scooping it up. "Sir, I am so sorry. This is a catastrophic mistake." Wendell didn't move. "I informed your officer of my identity, Captain. He confiscated my federal identification and arrested me without cause. Retrieve my wallet from his cargo pocket." Whitcomb spun on Rourke. "Give it to me. Now." He handed it over with numb fingers. Whitcomb flipped it open. The holographic DoD seal, the name Ashford, Wendell R., rank Captain, 06, United States Navy. And beneath it, in red lettering, his status as a Federal Task Force Inspector. The cuffs clicked open. Wendell adjusted his sleeves without so much as a glance at his own wrists. "Captain Diane Whitcomb, I presume," he said, his voice carrying easily across the now silent bullpen. "Yes, sir. Captain Ashford, I cannot begin to express." "A misunderstanding, Captain." Wendell repeated the word with icy precision. "I provided my name, my rank, my credentials. Officer Rourke did not misunderstand. He made a conscious decision that a man of my complexion couldn't hold the rank I do." "Now, wait a minute," Rourke said, finding his voice at last. "You were acting suspicious on my beat. I had a right to investigate." "Investigate what?" Wendell said, turning his full attention on him. "Standing at a crosswalk waiting for the light? Or was my crime wearing a uniform you felt I hadn't earned?" Rourke had no answer. He looked around the bullpen at colleagues who suddenly wouldn't meet his eyes. Whitcomb gestured desperately toward the stairs. "Sir, please, let's step into my office. Coffee, and I promise you I will handle this with the utmost severity." "No, Captain," Wendell said. "We will not be going to your office." He looked slowly around the room. The peeling paint, the overflowing files, the stunned faces. "I was sent to evaluate the culture and integrity of this precinct. My inspection has already begun. I've seen exactly what I needed to see, right here on this floor." He pulled a folded copy of the grant application from his breast pocket. "You applied for $4.6 million, claiming this precinct adheres to the highest standards of de-escalation and constitutional training. Within 5 minutes of entering your jurisdiction, I was profiled, verbally abused, and illegally detained. Not in an alley, Captain, in broad daylight on a public street." He tore the paper in half, then again, letting the pieces fall. "The funding is gone," he said quietly. "I'll be recommending federal oversight for this precinct." He turned to Rourke. "As for you, I don't only serve in uniform. I operate as a federal inspector under Department of Justice authority. You didn't just violate my civil rights officer. You assaulted a federal official. By tomorrow morning, the FBI will be at your door." Rourke's knees buckled. He caught himself on a desk, gasping. "Captain Whitcomb," Wendell said, walking toward the exit. "Expect a federal investigative team at 0800 tomorrow. Don't let these two officers leave the building until their weapons and badges are surrendered." He pushed through the heavy doors and out into the cold, hailed a cab, and left the precinct to sit with what it had built. Part 6. The Raid. The next morning, 4 unmarked black SUVs rolled into the precinct's reserved lot. Officer Rourke hadn't slept, sitting stripped of his badge in a plastic chair through the night. Down the hall, Priya Anand sat with her head in her hands. Captain Whitcomb was waiting in her office when Special Agent Marcus Delgado of the FBI's Cleveland field office and Senior DOJ Prosecutor Renata Cole walked in without knocking.
"Captain Whitcomb," Delgado said, "we're here to execute a federal search warrant on this precinct's servers, evidence lockers, and communication logs. We're also executing arrest warrants for Officer Dale Rourke and Officer Priya Anand." "I've fully cooperated," Whitcomb said, rising on unsteady legs. "I secured their save it for the mayor," Cole said. "You oversaw a department where a patrolman felt comfortable assaulting a decorated military officer in broad daylight. The Department of Justice is opening a pattern or practice investigation into this entire department, starting here." Downstairs, agents entered Rourke's holding room. Dale Rourke, Delgado corrected himself. "Stand up, hands behind your back." "I want my union rep," Rourke stammered. "He's been notified," Delgado said. "The union declined to represent you on this matter. Assaulting a federal official under a Pentagon directive tends to void a few clauses."
Cole stepped in, holding an evidence bag containing a small drive. "We secured your precinct server at 0300 this morning. Good thing, too, because at 4:15 someone tried remotely wiping your cruiser's dash camera. That's obstruction on top of everything else." Rourke went white. "And Officer Anand," Cole continued, "left the cabin microphone live the entire ride. We have every word you said about Captain Ashford in high-definition audio. You didn't just violate his rights, Mr. Rourke. You handed us the case yourself." The federal cuffs closed around his wrists in the exact spots he'd cuffed Wendell the day before. Part 7. 9 months later. The federal courthouse was packed for Rourke's sentencing. He'd lost 20 pounds. His suit hung loose on a frame that had shrunk along with everything else about him. Priya Anand had taken a plea deal. Cooperation in exchange for a misdemeanor charge, the surrender of her badge, and 500 hours of community service. On the stand, she'd broken the department's silence entirely, testifying not only about the day with Wendell, but about a pattern of profiling stretching back over Rourke's career. Testimony that opened a sweeping class-action suit on behalf of his prior victims. Captain Ashford sat quietly in the gallery, out of uniform, an American flag lapel pin the only sign of his service. Judge Everett Halloran looked down at Rourke with open disdain. "You were given a badge and the trust of the public," he said. "You looked at a man who has served this country for nearly 3 decades and saw only a target for your prejudice. The stolen valor statute you tried to weaponize exists to protect the honor of our armed forces. The only person in that crosswalk impersonating a man of honor was you." He sentenced Rourke to 7 years, without possibility of early parole, and a permanent bar from ever holding a badge or firearm again. Part 8. The Crosswalk Revisited. That afternoon, Wendell took a cab back to Brindlewood. The weather had turned, warm, bright, nothing like the freezing day the whole thing began. He stood again on the corner of Delancey and 4th. The precinct had been gutted and rebuilt from the inside. Whitcomb forced into early retirement, a federal consent decree installing independent oversight.
Every remaining officer required to re-interview for their own jobs and complete extensive bias and de-escalation training. A patrol car rolled up to the light. The young officer at the wheel caught his eye and offered a simple, respectful nod before the light changed. "Captain Ashford?" He turned. A young man in civilian clothes, orange community service vest, push broom in hand. Priya Anand's former partner, out of uniform for good. No, wait, it was someone else.
A familiar face from that bullpen who'd once stood frozen and silent near the back doors.
"I didn't think I'd see you again," the young man said quietly.
"We reap what we sow," Wendell said. "It seems you're paying your debts to this community."
"Every day, sir. I wanted to say thank you. I lost everything, but if you hadn't come along, I think I'd have become exactly like him. You saved me from that, even if I didn't deserve saving that day."
Wendell studied him a long moment. "You failed a test of character, but life is a series of them. You're no longer an officer, but you're still a citizen. Speak up when the room is silent. Do that, and you'll find your honor again." He turned and walked down Delancey Street, his posture as straight in a civilian suit as it had ever been in dress blues. A man who'd come looking for rot beneath the surface and had dragged it fully into the light. The end.